we need to get something straight. This is not nasal.
London calling to the faraway towns.
And this is also not nasal.
Do you have the time to listen to me whine?
And the truth of the matter is there's a big difference between sounding like you're nasal and actually being nasal. Now this is nasal. Do you have the time to listen to me whine? Notice how that's different from do you have the time to listen to me whine? And this is London calling nasal. London calling to the faraway towns. No war is declared and the battle come down. Versus London calling to the faraway towns. No war is declared and the battle come down. How can I tell that that's not actually nasal? Well, because basically I can sing the whole thing with my nose plugged. So, do you have the time to listen to me whine? About nothing and everything all at once. And it doesn't change the sound versus do you have the time? Completely changes the sound. Now, not everyone who sounds nasal actually is. And when we're talking about nasality in singing, remember we want everything to be in balance. In singing, we have kind of a spectrum of nasality from very nasal to very, very oral or very mouthy. So when I was demonstrating basket case, I was showing you that, do you have the time to listen to me whine? He was staying completely mouthy, completely oral. There was no nasality in it at all, even though it sounds that way. And as a matter of fact, sometimes if you sing too oral or too mouthy and not nasal at all, you actually sound like you have a cold. So if I completely plug my nose up, it sounds like I have a cold, even though everything is coming out of my mouth. So let's state the obvious. If you go too far in either direction, you're going to sound bad. Now let's actually talk about what creates this nasal sound, and more importantly, how you can fix it quickly. Now nasality happens when the soft palate, also called the velum, which is in the back part of the throat, behind the hard palate, which you can feel right behind your front teeth, this hard section right there, behind that is the soft palate or the velum. If this gets lowered, it allows the sound waves that get created by your vocal cords to actually travel into your nose. Now, I should point out that there's a bit of nasality that occurs naturally in almost all languages. You can think of the consonant M, like mother, or N, like nothing, or in Spanish, we have like an ñ, like a ña ña, like doña. And in French, we also have vowels that actually get nasalized as well, like the difference between mo and mon. And there's actually a certain amount of nasality that makes everything sound very natural and very normal. I showed you earlier what happens if you completely eliminate your nasality. You sound like a sick robot that doesn't have any humanity to it. Just remember though that we don't want to go too nasal. I should also point out that there are certain areas of singing for some people that often feel quite nasal. For instance, when people are singing through their passaggio or their bridge, but oftentimes they'll feel that there's a bit of nasality that occurs as they're singing through that bridge. So then, they feel some nasality even if there isn't any. No nasality. If you've been a member of my channel, you'll even hear me demonstrate like kind of bratty or kind of what we call like pharyngeal sounds, like this kind of na 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 na. But if I take out the N consonant, which is naturally nasal, and I replace that with a B consonant, which is naturally not nasal, then you'll see that this sound, even though it's ba 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 ba, still sounds very nasal, it actually is not. Ba 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 versus ba 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 ba, where you can clearly hear that there's some nasality to it. So that means that the first step is to become aware if there is some nasality, and if so, how to fix it.
Matt, I don't care about the soft palate. I just want to know if I'm nasal or not.
Don't worry, I've got you covered. So how do you know if you're actually singing nasal or not? Well, one very simple exercise that you can do is that you can just check for nasality by gently pinching your nostrils while you're singing a note. I'll show you exactly what I mean. So let's choose a really comfortable note for guys and for girls. And what we're gonna do is we're going to sing that on an ah. So let's try an E3 for guys. So we'll just sing an ah. As we sing that though, what we wanna do is we wanna gently pinch our nose and check to see if there's any nasality in it. So it would sound something like this. Ah. Now, if there's no change in tone between the ah and when you start pinching, then it's not nasal. However, if there is a change in tone or you feel a vibration in your nose as you're pinching it, then it is nasal, like oh, I feel it. I feel it all vibrating right in there. Ladies, we can try the same thing for you right here. Let's just try an ah. Good. Now, let's do the same thing, but let's just, for the sake of argument, let's do it nasal. So, you can hear how it's kind of expanding, and that's happening every time that some of the sound waves actually leave my nasal cavity after I'm done pinching them. It's like I pinch and release them. And instead, we want it completely out the mouth on this particular exercise. Now, I want you to try this anytime you're afraid if you're singing nasal. Keep in mind though, there is a little bit of natural nasality that occurs on some consonants like M, N, Nye, and some French vowels. However, by and large, you should feel for the most part that it's pretty much just out the mouth and not overly nasal. Now, another exercise for fixing your nasality is to actually focus on putting that tone more out the mouth or more oral. So rather than just thinking just kind of and just letting it go wherever it goes, instead pretend that you have a cold and you can't really sing out your nose at all. It all has to come straight out your mouth like ah versus What this cold sound does is it actually raises the soft palate or the velum. That way none of the sound waves can travel out and into your nose. Instead, they all have to go straight through your mouth, which is exactly what we want on a pure vowel like an ah. And as a matter of fact, you can try this on all the different vowels like ah, e, o, oo. If I add in my fingers on top of that, we can go ah, e, o, oo. And none of it is actually coming through my nose, as opposed to ah, e, o, oo, which you can tell pretty easily. And a final exercise to eliminate nasality is to start working with B consonants, like b, b, b. In order to form the B consonant, your lips press together, air comes into the back of your throat, but your soft palate is lifted. This creates kind of like a pressure chamber that all of a sudden opens when you actually release the vowel, like b, b, b. And the soft palate being high or low is actually what makes the difference between a b and m. On the m, I'm actually lowering the soft palate for just a moment to allow some of that nasality in there, which creates the nasal sound. So it's all coming through my nose. But with a b, my mouth is completely closed off and my soft palate is lifted, so there's not really a whole lot of sound until I actually open up my mouth. B, b. And we can actually try this on an exercise. So why don't we go ahead and just try a 5-tone scale. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But we'll do it on b, like but. So guys, you can join me right down here. We're starting on a D3. We'll just go ba 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 ba. Ladies, we can start a fifth above that on A3 right here. So ba 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 ba. Now, if you're going to ba 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 ba, then you're doing something wrong because you're not actually creating a real B consonant. Ba 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 is what we want. Now, when you're working on these exercises, always remember that a certain amount of nasality is totally natural in the singing voice. And while we don't want to be too nasal, we don't want to be completely oral or out or mouthy either. Part of that nasality is what makes us sound like a human. So embrace some of it. We just don't want to be too far. Also be aware that there are some times when it's going to feel like you're singing nasal, like na na And even though that feels super nasal, it actually isn't. The tone doesn't actually change. It's just that it's going to feel that way. And just because you're doing it doesn't actually mean that you are in fact doing it. But we want to make sure that if you are singing too nasal, that number one, you're aware of it, and number two, you know how to fix it. Guys, let me know which of these exercises was the most helpful for you. I cannot wait to start hearing how much cleaner your tone gets once we get rid of some of that ugly nasality. And if you found these exercises helpful, definitely check out my complete singing course, Master Your Voice, the only singing course out there featuring personal feedback from a 5-star coach, plus proven system of exercises to improve your voice.